St. Petersburg, 1866. A destitute former student commits a brutal double murder. But he doesn't kill in a fit of rage or out of desperate passion. He kills because he believes he has solved a math problem. In Dostoevsky's vision, the horror isn't the act itself, it's the intellectual framework used to excuse it. He saw that once a human life is reduced to a variable in an equation, there is no logical limit to how many lives can be deleted in the pursuit of a theoretical utopia. The author is Fyodor Dostoevsky. Informed by his deep roots in Russian Orthodox spirituality and his own years in a Siberian labor camp, he set out to expose the lethal danger of believing we can reason our way to a perfect morality. At the time, the Russian university yards were buzzing with utilitarianism, a philosophy championed by thinkers like John Stuart Mill. It argued that the morality of an action is determined by a single metric. Does it create the greatest happiness for the greatest number of people? Raskolnikov applies this logic to an old, corrupt pawnbroker. He calculates that by removing one useless life, he can seize her wealth to fund thousands of good deeds. In his mind, the math of his future charity outweighs the blood on his hands. He convinces himself that this arithmetic transforms a murder into a rational necessity. If the societal profit is high enough, the crime ceases to be a crime. But the humanitarian logic is a smokescreen. The true motivation is found in a university article Raskolnikov wrote titled On Crime, where he explores a much darker obsession with personal power. He was fascinated by the great man theory, the belief that history is driven by extraordinary figures like Napoleon, men who are inherently superior and therefore exempt from the moral laws that govern the masses. The murder is actually a self-administered test. Raskolnikov wants to prove he is one of these masters of the future, someone capable of stepping over traditional boundaries to forge a new morality. This sets up the central question of the novel. Can a human being successfully transcend morality to become a god, or will the attempt destroy them from within? The answer arrives the moment the axe swings. Raskolnikov's cold, mathematical theory instantly shatters, devolving into a scene of visceral, physical horror. His clean calculation failed to account for a single, unpredictable variable. The pawnbroker's innocent half-sister walks in during the act, and in a moment of frantic panic, Raskolnikov is forced to murder her as well. This is the philosophical failure at the heart of the crime. Dostoevsky suggests it is impossible to weigh the consequences of an action in a world that can never be perfectly predicted. In the aftermath, Raskolnikov's psyche begins to disintegrate. He falls into a state of delirious paranoia, plagued by insomnia and a crushing sense of isolation from the rest of the living. While he fears the police, his real predator is internal. He is fleeing the inescapable weight of a conscience that refuses his logical excuses. Reality proves the utilitarian calculation wrong. The human mind lacks the armor required to withstand the psychological blowback of playing God. Two opposing forces pull at Raskolnikov's fractured mind, turning his daily life into an internal courtroom. The first is the investigator Porfiry, who uses psychological warfare rather than physical proof. He knows that Raskolnikov's intellect is his greatest weakness. Porfiry acts as the voice of inescapable guilt. He forces Raskolnikov into dialogues that expose the contradictions in his theories, proving that no amount of logic can outsmart a grieving conscience. The second force is Sonya, a suffering prostitute who represents the Russian Orthodox values Raskolnikov tried to abandon. She offers no judgment, only a path toward redemption through humility. Long before the state intervenes, Raskolnikov's existence becomes a psychological hell. He has severed his connection to the human community, and the weight of that isolation proves more agonizing than any legal cell. Raskolnikov eventually breaks and confesses his crime to Sonya. He finally drops the utilitarian pretenses and admits the chilling truth. He didn't kill to help the poor, he killed to feed his own ego. This admission allows Raskolnikov to finally attempt what Dostoevsky calls kenosis, a theological concept for the emptying of the self. By stripping away his intellectual pride, he is forced to face his own human limitations. He confesses to the authorities and accepts a sentence in a Siberian labor camp. He consciously chooses a physical prison as his only real escape from the torturous prison of his own mind. Sonya follows him to Siberia, embodying Dostoevsky's belief that human connection is the only antidote to the madness of isolation. For Dostoevsky, suffering is the spiritual purification required when one severs their ties to humanity. It is the cost of re-entering a moral order that he believes is larger than human reason. Dostoevsky leaves us with a warning. When we use logic to bypass our conscience, we aren't creating a better world. We are merely building a more sophisticated cage for our own ego.